So I've been playing Deadlock for a while now, and I keep getting the same question pop up in the comments and in the chat. Should I even bother getting the game right now? And honestly, it's a fair question. So while I wanted to sit down and talk through it properly, uh, what it's like coming as a new player, where the game stands right now, and because I know a lot of you are going to ask anyway how it stacks up to Dota 2, since that obviously the comparison everyone makes. This isn't going to be a hype video. I'm not trying to sell you the game, just an honest breakdown. So, you know, first thing I want to talk about is what is it like as a new player? Well, let's start with the new player experience because that's honestly where most of the friction is right now. First thing, Deadlock is still in closed testing. It's not fully released. There are no storage page. You can just buy it from. You need an invite from someone who already has access, but that's pretty easy to get. So, step one, before you even think about whether the game's good, you have to actually get the access. And for a lot of people, that alone is just, something that they can't be bothered with that. And I get it. Once you're actually in, the second thing that hits you is that the game does not really explain itself. There's very little onboarding. You kind of just get dropped into the match and expected to figure it out, which, if you've played MOBA before, it's honestly pretty normal for the genre. But if you haven't, it can feel like a lot. The thing that really tripped me out personally was that Deadlock looked like a shooter. You've got guns, you've got aiming, and you've got cover. So your brain goes, okay, this is a shooter. I know how this works. And then you realize that's maybe 40% of actually what's going on. The other 60% is full MOBA, lane creeps, last hitting for currency, itemization, objectives, all of that. And nobody tells you that up front. You have to kind of bump into it and experience it yourself. So if you're thinking about getting into Deadlock right now, my honest advice is go in expecting a MOBA that happens to have a shooter mechanic layered on top, not a shooter with some extra systems bolted on. That mental shift alone will save you a lot of early confusion. So where the game actually stands right now is another thing I want to talk about. Deadlock is a Valve game, which already tells you a few things. It's built on Source 2, the same engine as Dota 2 and Counter Strike 2. And Valve's approach with this game has been pretty typical of how they handle things in early testing. Slow, invite only, rollout, frequent ballot patches, no marketing push, basically letting word of mouth and community interest carry it instead of like a normal launch. Interest in the game has genuinely been pretty wild, especially early on and even now. It has become one of the most wishlisted and most talked about unreleased games on Steam almost immediately, even though nobody outside of an invited players could actually play it. That tells you something about the appetite for it. Even if the actual player numbers day to day have gone up and down a fair bit since, which honestly makes sense for a game that's still not even fully out, the thing I'd say to anyone trying to gauge whether or not it's worth it right now, the game is genuinely still being figured out by Valve and by the community. Heroes get reworked systems. Sorry, heroes get reworked. Systems get changed. And what's true about the game today might not be true in 3 months. And that's what I've noticed over playing this game as well. So if you're kind of a new player who wants a finished, stable experience, you might want to wait. If you like watching or being a part of a game that's still being shaped, that's actually pretty interesting to be playing it right now. So let's say we're comparing it to something like Dota 2. I want to be upfront. I'm coming at this from an old school RuneScape background, not a deep Dota background. So take my comparison with that in mind, but I've played enough Dota to talk about the overlap. The DNA is shared. Same developer, similar core loop, laning phase, last hitting creeps for gold, or in this case, souls, buying items, working towards objectives, team fights, that snowball, the game one way or another. If you play Dota, none of that structure is going to feel unfamiliar. Big difference is obviously the camera and the combat. Dota is top down, click to move, ability targeting with a cursor. Deadlock is a third person. You're actually aiming with your mouse like a shooter, moving your character directly instead of clicking a destination. That's a genuinely different skill set. A 10,000 hour Dota player doesn't necessarily have an advantage here because the actual moment to moment combat requires shooter style aim and movement, not point and click precision. I think that's actually Deadlock's most interesting pitch. Honestly, it's trying to make people who's never touched a top down MOBA because that camera and control style just isn't for them and give them a way into that same strategic depth through control scheme that feels more like games that are ready to play. Whether that fully works is still an open question, but I think that's the idea. The other difference worth mentioning is scale and polish. Dota 2 has had over a decade of updates, a massive item pool, a huge hero roster, seasonal content, the whole thing. Deadlock's hero roster is smaller. The systems are still being treated on, and it doesn't have that decade of refinement yet, which makes sense. It's not supposed to have that yet. So it's not really fair to compare them as equals right now. It's more like comparing Dota 2 in its early Valve years to Dota 2 today. Give it time before judging it against something with 10 plus years of a head start. If I had to sum up the comparison of one line, Dota 2 is in the deep, refined, decade old version of this formula. Deadlock is in the same DNA, wearing a different skin, still figuring out who it wants to be. Look, so I guess to wrap up, should you get into Deadlock right now as a new player? Honestly, if you can actually get access and you go in with realistic expectations about the rough edges, I think it's worth trying. It's a genuinely interesting take on MOBA formula. And being here, whilst it's being shaped, is kind of fun in its own way because you get to go along and experience that journey. If you're expecting Dota 2's level of polish on day one, you're going to be disappointed. But that's not really fair to to compare yet, especially when it's in its alpha beta build still. Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you've got more Dota 2 experience than me. I'd actually love to hear how it compares from someone who puts in real hours into the game. If you're new here, I'm ZireTV. I started out doing OSRS content. Now I'm stumbling through Deadlock as a genuine beginner. If that sounds like your kind of thing, stick around. See you in the next one.